Hello and welcome to the second video in my 5-part series for the Donna Downey Studios and Artist Gang. We are doing Craypaws, Oil Pastels by Sakura of America in this series, and I'm going to play with some encaustics. So I'm going to do some wax-based stuff. And I started with a tag. I mentioned in the first video I'm doing all of this series is all being done on tags. And it's shipping tags. And I did gesso this tag, but I used an encaustic gesso. So this gesso does better under high heat and is a really great ground for wax-based pieces. I'm not going to keep my encaustic like set up on screen because it's big and it's hot and it gets in the way and I don't want to burn myself. So I have a skillet that I keep little tin cans in. They're like little tin containers, very specific for encaustic, that I picked up. You could use whatever. And I put my encaustic medium in those, and then it melts as they sit in the skillet. Encaustic medium is like a mix between wax and damar resin, so it has it's a compound, and that I just use it already pre-made. It's easiest for me that way. I decided that I have in the past. Okay, let me start over. I apologize. You can buy encaustic mediums, which are basically colored encaustic. Or colored waxes, or you can mix your own. And I have mixed my own in the past with just the clear or normal colored encaustic medium, which is that giant bag that you saw me take out of earlier. And then, so I melted that, and then I put in oil paints after I let some of the liquid evaporate. So I was wondering if I could do the same thing with these oil pastels because they already have less liquid in them, I would say, than an acrylic or than an oil paint does, because they don't move like an oil paint moves. So what I did was you saw me, I carved off using my palette knife some pieces of yellow and like the kind of golden ochre color, and I colored my wax with that. And then I put down a layer of basic, just the normal encaustic medium, and put down 2 layers, and then I fused those layers, and then I used the colored wax through a stencil, through an Wow Studio stencil. And it's very cool, and it's like super unique, and I totally have not done any of this stuff before, and it's really fun. So it's really cool to experiment. My whole tag is wax-based now, and I knew from some other things I had sort of played with in the past that I could also directly apply the oil pastel to the wax. I did just fuse the layer. So when you put a layer of wax down and then you put a second layer on top of it, you have to fuse them together so that they aren't just like separate layers laying next to each other. And it's really easy. You just slightly warm up the second layer or the third layer or the fourth layer, or however far you are. You just warm that up really lightly with this like crazy ginormous heat gun that gets really hot and is like kind of scary actually, but it does a lot of things and has a lot of different temperature variations, which work really well for encaustic. So I use that and I fuse the layers together, and then when I put the oil pastel around the edges and then I fuse the layers again, I let them get too hot, so the color kind of started to run. And then I experimented with putting down some Tim Holtz tissue wrap, which looked okay, but I wasn't really loving it, and I felt like it wasn't doing what I wanted. So the great thing about wax is all you have to do is heat it up, and then I was able to pull that piece of tissue wrap up. So now that's just sitting off to the side. Then I got out a stylus tool, and I did some mark making in the wax. So I made pits and crosses, not crosses, I did dots. I made pits and dots, and then I did some handwriting into the wax. So I carved into the wax and I left a divot, and then I used a really dark oil pastel and I rubbed it down into those crevices that I had made, and then using some linseed oil and a paper towel, I can now pick up the excess oil pastel from that top layer of the wax, and the oil pastel will only be stuck down in the grooves that I carved in. And how cool is that, right? So that's a pretty cool technique too. I have colored the wax specifically while it's hot, and then I added color to the wax while it's cool, and I can also carve into the wax and apply the oil pastel to highlight those textures and grooves that I had made. Really, really cool. And that was my favorite part, was really highlighting some of these kind of drawings and textures, and I'm mark making. That's exactly what I'm doing, but I'm mark making with encaustic and oil pastel, and it's really cool. I love it. So I did some more dots all the way around that stenciled piece, and then I decided to sketch along the edge and do kind of like a doodle frame or like a border. Scratchy and really fun. And then I did some dots in a couple places. And then I was really digging on that handwriting that I had done earlier. So I'm going to go back in and redo that too in a little bit. And that turns out really cool. And I know it gets really scary when you kind of throw this like dark brown oil pastel on top of this really like feminine kind of dainty yellowy tag. Like it's kind of dreamy with all the wax all over it. And then I threw down all that really dark brown. This is kind of funny, but it comes up, I promise. That linseed oil really picks it right up. It's pretty awesome. And you can use linseed oil, like I should say, and I probably should have said in the first video, so oil pastels are they're a really great drawing tool, and people like make some really amazing drawings from them. Linseed oil is one of the oils you can use that will help blend your oil pastels together. So in this case, I'm using it to wipe it up off the wax, but there are other uses for it for sure. I did decide to go back in with that yellow ochre kind of colored, I don't know if that's the exact name, but that's what it reminds me of, that yellow ochre colored pastel, and add some more sort of color fade around the edge since I messed that up earlier and got rid of it. Here I am. I did just darken up that sort of handwriting. I had kind of wiped it out too much and gotten rid of it, but I loved it. I loved the way it looked. So I gave it a second try and just tried to be gentler with it this time and not wipe so much away. So there we have it. I'm going to tie my tag off with some recycled sari ribbon, and that's it. Then this tag is done. So use your oil pastels with your encaustics. Thanks so much for being here and watching video 2. Pop on over to video 3. You can follow me if you find me, DeeDee Catron, on YouTube, or visit my website or anything like that. And I have tons of other mixed media videos and techniques to share with you. Thank you so much for joining me.